The cost of living is soaring, not just for extras, but for essentials. Housing, food, healthcare, the things we need just to exist. In both Canada and the United States, millions are feeling the squeeze. Working full-time doesn't guarantee a decent life anymore. Wages are stagnant, but prices, they just keep climbing. It's about families struggling to put food on the table, working multiple jobs and still barely making rent. The single mom working 2 jobs, exhausted but still unable to afford childcare. The senior citizen choosing between medication and groceries. This is the reality for millions in 2 of the wealthiest nations on Earth. The numbers tell a stark story. Rent is skyrocketing, wages are lagging behind, and the cost of basic necessities keeps rising. But beyond the statistics are real people, struggling with real consequences. This isn't about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about the erosion of hope, the crushing weight of constant worry. Imagine the constant stress of living paycheck to paycheck, never knowing if you'll be able to make ends meet. Imagine the shame of not being able to provide for your family, the fear of losing your home. This is the reality for far too many. Anxiety, depression, and even suicidal thoughts become more prevalent. This is a systemic failure that demands systemic solutions. It's time to acknowledge the human cost of this crisis and fight for a future where everyone can afford to live with dignity and hope. Let's take a look at the numbers. On the surface, the United States might seem more expensive, but when we factor in wages and social safety nets, the picture gets more complex. In Canada, the average monthly cost of living hovers around 3,000 Canadian dollars. In the United States, it's slightly lower, around 2,500 US dollars. But here's the catch. Canadians on average earn less after taxes. The median after-tax household income in Canada is about 66,800 Canadian dollars, compared to 64,240 US dollars in the United States. Canadians are actually facing a tighter squeeze when you compare income to expenses. And then there's rent. In major Canadian cities like Toronto and Vancouver, finding an affordable place to live feels like searching for a unicorn. The average rent for a 1-bedroom apartment in a Canadian city center is around 1,235 Canadian dollars. In the United States, it's higher, around 1,500 US dollars. For many Canadians, rent eats up a huge chunk of their take-home pay, leaving little room for anything else. This is the rent trap, working just to keep a roof over your head, with little hope of getting ahead. It's about the stress of living with constant housing insecurity, the fear of eviction, the inability to put down roots and build a future. Beyond the poverty line, a look at living wage requirements. The official poverty line is often criticized for being woefully inadequate. It doesn't reflect the true cost of living in most places. That's why many organizations use a living wage calculation, which factors in the actual cost of housing, food, transportation, healthcare, and other basic necessities. In Canada, to live above the poverty line, a single person needs to earn at least 45,000 to 50,000 Canadian dollars per year. A family needs even more, around 100,000 to 115,000 Canadian dollars. In the US, the numbers are similar. Individuals need 38,000 to 42,000 US dollars, and families need 75,000 to 90,000 US dollars just to stay above the poverty line. These figures highlight a sobering reality. Millions of hardworking people in both Canada and the US are struggling to afford the basic necessities of life. The weight of worry, chronic stress, and the erosion of well-being. Imagine waking up every morning with a knot of anxiety in your stomach. Not about a presentation or a deadline, but about paying your rent, putting food on the table, or affording your child's medication. This is the reality for millions struggling to make ends meet in Canada and the US. This isn't just everyday stress. It's chronic financial stress, a relentless pressure that wears down the body and mind. It triggers a cascade of physiological responses, increased cortisol, elevated heart rate, disrupted sleep, that take a toll over time. It erodes your sense of well-being, making it difficult to experience joy, hope, or even simple contentment. This chronic stress increases the risk of anxiety disorders, depression, and even cardiovascular problems. The shame spiral. Internalizing systemic failures. One of the cruelest aspects of this affordability crisis is the tendency to internalize systemic failures. When people work hard but still can't afford basic necessities, they start blaming themselves. They ask themselves, what am I doing wrong? Why can't I get ahead? They compare themselves to others, often unaware that many are facing similar struggles. This self-blame leads to shame, a toxic emotion that isolates and silences. People struggling with financial insecurity often withdraw from social connections, fearing judgment or feeling like a burden. This isolation deepens their despair, making it even harder to reach out for help or support. Learned helplessness when hope fades and agency dwindles. Imagine trying everything in your power to improve your situation. Working extra shifts, taking on a second job, cutting expenses to the bone, only to find yourself falling further behind. This cycle of effort and disappointment can lead to a state of learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is a psychological phenomenon that occurs when people experience repeated setbacks despite their best efforts. They begin to believe that their actions have no impact on their circumstances, that they're powerless to change their situation. This sense of hopelessness is incredibly damaging. It saps motivation, stifles creativity, and makes it difficult to envision a better future. Cognitive overload, the mental bandwidth of poverty. Poverty isn't just about a lack of financial resources. It's also about a scarcity of mental bandwidth. When you're constantly worried about making ends meet, it consumes your cognitive capacity, leaving less mental space for other essential tasks. This cognitive overload impairs decision-making, reduces impulse control, and makes it difficult to plan for the future. It's like trying to run a marathon with a heavy weight on your back. You're constantly expending energy just to stay afloat. This cognitive depletion can have long-term consequences for educational attainment, career prospects, and overall well-being. A new landscape of distress meeting clients where they are. The therapy room is no longer immune to the economic anxieties of our time. Clients are showing up not just with relationship issues or existential dilemmas, but with the raw, visceral stress of simply trying to survive. This isn't about a lack of coping skills or personal resilience. It's about the sheer exhaustion of navigating a system that feels increasingly rigged against them. As therapists, we need to meet clients where they are, acknowledging the profound impact of economic hardship on mental and emotional well-being. This means listening without judgment, validating their experiences, and resisting the urge to offer simplistic solutions. It's about creating a space where their struggles are acknowledged, not minimized. Beyond individual resilience, deconstructing shame and validating reality. One of the most insidious effects of economic hardship is the internalization of systemic failures. Clients often blame themselves, questioning their worth and abilities when they can't achieve financial stability. As therapists, we need to gently but firmly challenge these narratives. We need to help clients deconstruct the shame that keeps them stuck, reminding them that their worth is not tied to their net worth. This involves validating their lived experiences, acknowledging the very real barriers they face: stagnant wages, soaring housing costs, inadequate social safety nets. It's about helping them see that their struggles are not a reflection of personal failing, but a symptom of a system that is failing them. This validation is crucial. Restoring nervous system regulation, trauma-informed tools for economic stress. Chronic financial stress takes a toll on the body, keeping the nervous system in a perpetual state of fight or flight. This can manifest as anxiety, insomnia, digestive issues, and a host of other physical and emotional symptoms. As therapists, we need to incorporate somatic awareness and regulation techniques into our work with clients experiencing economic hardship. This might involve teaching them grounding techniques, breathwork exercises, or mindfulness practices to help calm their nervous systems and regain a sense of safety. It's about helping them reconnect with their bodies, to notice the physical sensations of stress, and develop tools for self-soothing. These resources can serve as anchors in times of stress, providing a much-needed respite from the constant worry and overwhelm. Raising the floor, the living wage imperative. Let's talk solutions. Because here's the thing, therapy can help people cope, but it can't magically conjure up affordable rent or put food on the table. We need systemic change. First up, the minimum wage. It's not a radical idea, it's basic economics. People who work full-time deserve to earn a living wage enough to cover rent, food, healthcare, and a bit left over for life's essentials. In both Canada and the US, the minimum wage lags woefully behind the actual cost of living in many cities. This isn't just about numbers, it's about dignity. It's about ensuring that everyone who works hard has a chance to not just survive, but to thrive. Building homes, building hope. Investing in non-market housing. Let's talk about housing. It's not just about having a roof over your head. It's about having a place to call home, a foundation for stability and belonging. For too long, we've relied on the private market to solve our housing crisis. But the market has failed. It's driven by profit, not people. We need governments to step up and invest in non-market housing solutions. Deeply affordable, safe, and dignified housing that meets the needs of diverse communities. This means building new units. But it also means preserving existing affordable housing stock and implementing policies that prevent displacement and gentrification. Mental health care for all, recognizing a public health crisis. The mental health implications of this affordability crisis are undeniable. People are struggling with anxiety, depression, insomnia. The list goes on. Yet access to mental health care remains a significant barrier for far too many. We need a system that provides universal access to mental health care, regardless of income or employment status. This means expanding public funding, reducing wait times, and ensuring culturally competent services are available to all. We also need to address the root causes of mental health challenges, including poverty, discrimination, and social isolation. It's time to stop treating it as a separate issue and start treating it with the same urgency and importance as physical health. Beyond Band-Aids, reframing poverty as a policy failure. We can't keep treating the symptoms of this affordability crisis with Band-Aid solutions. We need to address the root causes, the systemic inequalities that keep people trapped in poverty. This means challenging the narrative that poverty is a personal failing. It's about recognizing that poverty is a policy choice, a result of deliberate decisions made by those in power. We need bold, transformative policies that prioritize the well-being of all people, not just the privileged few. This includes progressive taxation, robust social safety nets, and investments in public services that level the playing field. It's about creating an economy that works for everyone, not just those at the top. It's about building a society where everyone has the opportunity to reach their full potential, regardless of their zip code or the size of their bank account. It's time to stop normalizing poverty and abundance. We have the resources to create a more just and equitable society. What we need is the political will. A crossroads of crisis, from surviving to thriving. We stand at a crossroads. The cost of living crisis is a system overload. Millions are struggling to keep their heads above water. Families choosing between rent and groceries, seniors depleting savings for medication, young people delaying dreams. This is a human dignity crisis. The mental health implications are staggering. The shame of not being able to provide, the crushing weight of uncertainty. We're seeing it in therapy rooms, in shelters, in communities across both nations. People are afraid and losing hope. This isn't about a lack of hard work. It's about a system failing to provide basic needs. These are necessities, not privileges. When millions are deprived, it's a societal failure. Reimagining the possible, a collective call for dignity and hope. We can't keep slapping Band-Aids on a gaping wound. Individual resilience can only take us so far when the systems themselves are rigged against us. We need bold, systemic change. We need policies that prioritize people over profit, that recognize housing as a human right, and that ensure everyone who works full-time can afford to live with dignity. This isn't about handouts, It's about a hand up. It's about creating a society where everyone has a fair shot at a decent life, where hard work translates into a path out of poverty, not a perpetuation of it. This requires a shift in perspective. We need to stop accepting the unacceptable. We need to challenge the narrative that poverty is inevitable, that there's not enough to go around. There is enough. But it's time we start sharing it more equitably. This is a call to action for policymakers, for community leaders, for each and every one of us. Let's stop normalizing this crisis. Let's stand together and demand better for ourselves, for our neighbors, for the future of our nations. We can do better. We must do better. Because a society that allows so many to struggle while a few thrive isn't just economically unsustainable, it's morally bankrupt. Let's choose a different path, one paved with dignity, hope, and the unwavering belief that everyone deserves a chance to not just survive, but to truly thrive.